Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 314 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachel Herron. So thrilled that you are here with me today as we are speaking with Vanessa Hua. And it was a delight to talk to her. We're going to talk about moving the body as part of our writing practice. And we're going to talk about foraging and reverse outlining and letting the subconscious do the work. So please stick around for that. You won't have to wait long because this is the quickest opener ever, because in about 1 hour, I'm going to leave for Romance Writers of New Zealand, where I am a keynote, and I'm super, super nervous and very excited. This is my first time out in the world since the pandemic. So I'm not used to wearing fancy clothes, not used to putting on makeup every day. Well, actually, I always put on my lipstick, but so it's going to be awesome. I've been working on the speech. I'm actually thinking about perhaps sharing the speech with you. I don't know if that's cool or not, but I'll check with the organizer. But they wanted to know about my journey as a hybrid author. And I found that I didn't really know what I wanted to say until I suddenly knew what I wanted to say. And I said it in the speech anyway. I haven't given the speech yet, but y'all, the speech is 7,500 words long. I have to fill 45 minutes and I speak very quickly. So that was a lot of space. And yeah, so perhaps I will do that as like a little bonus or a long bonus episode coming up here pretty soon. Yes. So this is just to say hi and bye, the drive-by update. And now I'm going to give Vanessa's bio, and then I'm going to post this podcast, and then I'm going to go do the conference. And when you hear this, I will be there. And I'm so excited and grateful. Okay. Here we go. Vanessa Hua is a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle and the author of the novel A River of Stars and a story collection, Deceit and Other Possibilities. A National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, she has also received a Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, and a Steinbeck Fellowship in Creative Writing, as well as awards from the Society of Professional Journalists, among others. She has filed stories from China, Burma, South Korea, and elsewhere, and her work has appeared in such publications as the New York Times and the Washington Post. She now lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her family, and Forbidden City is her newest novel. Please enjoy this awesome conversation with Vanessa and get some of your own writing done, and then come tell me about it. Happy writing, everybody. Well, I am so excited that you are on the show today. Will you please share your name with us and your pronouns?
I'm Vanessa Hua, and I am she, her.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the show, and congratulations on the recent release of Forbidden City, which just came out a couple weeks ago.
Well, actually, because of supply chain issues, the pub date was twice delayed, and it's now coming out May 10th.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay, well, this show will go out after that. So when people listen, it will
Yes.
be out. How frustrating that must be.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. But yesterday, when the UPS man arrived with my author copies, I said, "Can I take your picture?" Because I don't know, when you publish a book, you realize how many people, what a group effort it takes
Yeah.
to, it starts with me, but then my agent, my editor, the writing group, everyone. It's kind of humbling to think about how many hands may touch a book before it arrives on my shelf, and certainly on readers' shelves.
Isn't that absolutely amazing? And the first time you touch your book, this new baby, it's made real. It's not just the words in your head. It went through everybody else, all of those hands, and now it's in your hands. And I think that that's absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
I would love to talk to you about, and I'm sure that you get this question a lot, but how do you do it? Because you are a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. You have twins, according to your bio,
Yes.
and you're writing books, multiple books. How do you get it all done?
So it's not orderly at all. I think it can really change from day to day, especially during this run up to publication. This morning I was in Chinatown getting my photo taken for a story. Then I dashed back to work on a student packet. I also teach creative
Yes, you also
writing.
teach. Yes.
Yes. So, and then I had to answer a question about a story I'm doing. And, you know, you know, on the other hand, when I had a bit of a lull in between things last week, or maybe was it 2 weeks ago, I was able to work on my next project, and it was super exciting and it made me so happy. But to answer your question, I think it's not so much a rigid routine, because I don't know what my life will look like day to day. But I think something that I always hold to be true is to make the most of the time that I do have. And by that, I mean, first, figuring out what my hours of power are. I'm a morning person, not a night owl. And so I try to do the work that means the most to me when I'm at my best creatively. I also, under that banner of making the most of the time I do have, I have a PDF to voice app where I will upload my work in progress or student work or anything that I need to be immersing myself in, and I'll listen to it when I go for a walk or commuting or whatever time I do have. I was reading an interview today with author Vohini Vara, who's a wonderful journalist, has a new novel coming out in May as well. And she talked about working full time. And some years she wrote nothing. Some years, others, she wrote more, or she wrote on the weekends or in between pickup, or wherever she could find it. And so, especially during the pandemic, it was a matter of, first there were, base survival. How do I keep everyone safe and healthy and happy? But then again, finding the time for it. So it's rare when you have those oceans of time in which you can, I'm no longer in my 20s in grad school, right? I have many more responsibilities. So it's just about making, again, the most of the time that you have.
I think we can't hear this enough, that I think all of us do long for the writer's retreat out on the coast where there's nothing available to you but writing, but that is just not the reality. And we have to fit our writing into those pockets of life.
The interstitial.
Exactly. What did Toni Morrison say? On the edges of the day, where it fits in. I would love to pick your brain for just a second on a question that was not on the list, but I hear this a lot from students who have been journalists. And sometimes I think that having been a journalist / a scientist and then going into fiction writing it's not necessarily a hindrance, but it can definitely confuse people. How do you make that switch in your brain from going from the journalism brain to the fiction writing brain? What does that feel like?
Well, I'll share a story from grad school when I was getting my MFA. By then, I had a career for years as a journalist, and I brought in a draft of what would become Forbidden City, my novel coming out.
Oh.
And I remember the professor said, "This is reportage." And he did not mean that in a complimentary way. And I felt like leaping up out of my seat and saying, "Democracy dies in darkness." But I actually came to understand what he was getting at. With science, with journalism, you're supposed to approach with neutrality. Whereas fiction, the best fiction, has a sense of consciousness, not social consciousness, I mean, although certainly your character might have that, but just a very unique view of the world. Your character, it can't feel like a lens panning over a crowd. It has to be whatever your character might be noticing or thinking about. And so, it is interesting. I think there are many who do both, or who make a switch. And that is something that I had to learn how to do, achieving a sense of voice, I don't know, a filtered perspective, let's say. On the other hand, I do think that being a journalist has helped me in my fiction writing, not only from my ability to do research, but just getting in the habit of writing on deadline, writing daily when I can, and being open to edits. Just knowing that the first draft is not the last draft. Likewise, I think being a fiction writer helps my journalism, because I'm more likely to think about narrative arc, character, setting in ways that I didn't when I was initially starting out. I think if you look at my college articles, they look like court transcripts. It's a series of quotes and then it ends.
And now you have all of those superpowers kind of blended together into yourself. What a wonderful set of tools to be able to choose from on a daily basis that you have. Thank you for that. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
Probably distractions. I think as a mother of twins, they're 10 and a half. We also live with my elderly mother. I
Wow.
have many different work responsibilities. It always feels like a pot is boiling on the edge of boiling over. So, and I think there's been studies that every time you switch between a task,
Yes.
your productivity goes down. So, I think for me, what can help is laying out a to-do list and a to don't or to did list
Mm.
at the end of the day, where I kind of reflect upon what I actually did do. And there's a friends, Nicole Chung has talked about this idea of parking downhill, meaning, saving something that you can easily pick up the next day so that you can have that lift off when you begin.
I love that concept, the parking downhill. Nicole Chung's fabulous, but I hadn't heard
Yes.
that one. I call it, and I took this from a student. This is not my idea, but I have my to-do list and I have my ta-da list, which is
Right.
what I put on all of the things that I have done, and it really is
Oh, I was calling it to did, but I prefer to da. Ta-da.
ta-da. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
What about your biggest joy in writing?
When somehow my consciousness delivers up something that was the answer all along, the call coming from inside the house that so perfectly fits the narrative or the scene, but I never could have predicted it from the outset when on page one. It honestly feels like magic, but I also know it's just part of the process that you're getting to know this character, figuring things out. And that often those ideas don't come when you're sitting in front of the computer. It's when I'm swimming, when I'm going for a walk, when I'm away from sort of the page staring at me and allowing the subconsciousness to bubble up.
And learning, and I know this takes a while, but learning to trust that it will.
Yeah,
That's one of
that's hard.
that's a
It's
challenge.
you're saying like I don't know what's going to happen or how, but
Right.
I'll something will come to me.
Right. Right. Exactly. My brain always wants to say, no, not this time. That it's always happened in the past, but it's not going to happen this time, but
Right, right.
it always does.
Yes.
Can you share? Oh, actually, before I ask you about the craft tip that you share, I just must mention most people listen on the podcast, but a few people watch it on the YouTube, and you have a Keanu pillow on your bookcase. Can you please tell me about that? Because it is divine.
Definitely. So during the pandemic, I have two Asian American writer friends, Amy Fan and Beth Lynn, and we sort of took turns sending each other surprises. And this was one round this was a gift I received.
I think it is absolutely perfect. Thank you for
Well,
having
he
that
is
there.
part, yeah, he Keanu is part Chinese, so we claim him.
Oh my goodness. I just saw the new Toy Story where he plays the Canadian Daredevil, and he was amazing, and as usual.
I had no idea. I'll have to check that out.
You will enjoy it. Your kids are probably just the right age. My wife is not the right age, but it was still fun. Can you share a craft tip of any sort with us?
So, although I just sort of waxed rhapsodic about the subconsciousness bubbling up, and I do actually recommend physical activity as a practice, as part of the writing practice. That counts too. I also love reverse outlining, which is to say, I write my draft and then afterwards I do a scene by scene breakdown. What are the characters? What's at stake? And that's when I begin to realize like this thread accidentally somehow got dropped, or this character never showed up again, or how can I recast this? And so I let my subconsciousness guide the early draft, and then when I look back on it, I use the other side of my brain to analytically try and figure out how to address a different issue. And another thing I love doing is just advising people, or for myself, to do a timeline for their character. So even though not all of it, most of it won't appear. Say, for example, with A River of Stars, my first novel, I realized she'd been born under the one-child policy in China. And that completely helped me understand why she was so ambivalent towards motherhood. So again, if I hadn't sat there and charted it out, I mean, it's a matter of like realizing that your character, how they were shaped by 9/11, how they were shaped, how old were they when they were shaped by the pandemic? All these things can be crucial, even if it's not set in that time period.
So what I'm hearing is being using that subconscious motivation to move you through a draft, but then really putting the critical lens and asking questions about what you have afterwards as
Yes.
regards time and what is in the book. I love the reverse outline myself. That is when I start to finally understand what my book is.
Yes.
I wish I could understand ahead of time, and I just can't, and that's okay.
It's when you put on your X-ray vision. So
yes, the X-ray vision, that's perfect. I also really liked what you said about exercise being, or movement being, part of the writing practice. I believe that, but I don't think I've ever thought about it so clearly and succinctly. And later, when I make myself go out on my hike up the hill, I'm going to tell myself this is writing work.
it is. I'm
And perhaps
serious.
I will. You know, I absolutely, I believe in swimming. I'm a big swimmer. But the hiking, which is something I'm trying to add, I'm gonna do that. Thank you. When you are doing your motion, do you listen to things, or are you really thinking about what you're writing?
Well, I do
I
have
know,
a friend who listens to audiobooks while she's swimming, but I am not so technologically advanced.
I have music when I swim. I figured that one out. I cannot figure out an audiobook, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say generally no. But then, because it's already, my mind's already engaged with the environment that's around me. And that's what lets me, I don't know. That's when the breakthroughs come.
Yeah, because you're not actually thinking about it, about the
Yes.
work in that moment.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'm also a believer in the fact that if you're not feeling well, if you feel gross, like that you just sat there all day, and sitting's supposed to be the new smoking, you're just not going to be at your best creatively.
Thank you for that reminder, which we all need. Speaking as a person who was like at my desk for 8 hours without like moving yesterday,
Yeah.
did not feel good. What thing in your life affects your writing in a surprising way?
Well, I think before I became a mother, I was very concerned about my identity. Would I ever finish a book? Now that I am a mother, I'm very cognizant of the responsibilities I have. You know, even right now, I'm not with them because I'm in this conversation. But I have seen studies that about boys whose mothers work, and how that it make them become more equitable partners at when they grow up, in terms of doing chores and housework. But I think, though I wanted to be a mother, I don't think I realized how much it would affect my writing practice or way I see the world. Just seeing everything new for the first time, understanding. I was there the first time it started raining, and their confusion and wonder, or the way they use language. We were in REI, they were much younger, and they referred to the kayaks as rocket ships. And they looked, I mean, I think children are naturally poets. And then we grow up and we learn the proper names of things. And so it's, as creative writers, as a fiction writer, it's finding my way back to that sense of play and creativity that my kids reminded me that I once so naturally and openly had.
That's a gorgeous way to look at it. What advice would you give to the parent right now who is struggling to get her writing done?
Well, I compare it to learning to walk again. Let's say, watching at first when your kid's just trying to figure out how to roll over, then they're learning how to crawl, and their face is mashed in the carpet and their butt's in the air. But over time, then they're sitting up, then they're cruising, holding on to something, then they're walking, then they're running. And it can feel very slow and frustrating, and that you're not making progress at all. But I would just say you are. You may not see it in the moment. You're just trying to survive in the moment. But incremental progress is still progress.
Mm-hmm. Oh, truer words. Thank you for that. Yeah. What is the best book that you've read recently?
see. It's funny. Whenever I get asked this question, suddenly my mind goes blank.
I go blank. That's why I always send the questions in advance. And it is because of that question, because if you asked me that right now, I would have no answer for you.
Right. You think, I've never read a book at all.
Exactly. Not once.
I have a pair of books that actually go well together. One is Adrienne Self's The End of the World House, and it's about time loops, the set in the Louvre, late stage capitalism, female friendship.
She's been on the show. She's a good friend of a friend,
wonderful.
and she's beautiful. And I haven't read it yet. It's on my list.
Yes. Yeah. Well, like her other books, you will read it. There's a moment where you will scream, and then you'll reread it to try and figure out how she did it.
Yes.
And then another book is by Allegra Hyde Eleutheria, and it is set in the near future. A lot of climate change, near apocalyptic collapse. And a young heroine who goes there and sort of discovers the truth behind her ideals. And I think both books have really gripping female characters and, get at some of the questions through a speculative lens that are haunting us at present.
Thank you. I'm going to read both of those. I'd heard of Eleutheria, but it's not on my list, but now it is. Thank you. Yes. Can you please tell us about Forbidden City and where we can find you as well?
Sure. So you can find me at www.vanessahua.com. That's VANESSAHUA.com. And Forbidden City is the story of May, a young girl from the village who is selected for a mysterious duty in the capital. And when she arrives, she realizes this is inspired by true events. She's part of a dance troupe of young women who do ballroom dancing with Chairman Mao and other top cadre. And she quickly becomes key to his plans to unseat a rival. And it was based upon, I was inspired by a photo I saw about a decade and a half ago, Chairman Mao surrounded by these giggling teenage girls. And I was astonished to learn about this connection to ballroom dancing, and further that some of these young women went on to, carry the title confidential clerk or nurse. And they would handle his correspondence. They would translate his speech when it became garbled. And I just thought it was incredible that these young girls who'd been raised to believe he was a god, they were in suddenly such an intimate relationship with him in his inner circle and trying to understand what that must have been like. And that really was the inspiration for this novel.
Isn't that marvelous though? You saw a photograph and the photograph made your mind say, what? And start filling in those blanks. And 10.5 years later, the book is in your hand. I just got goosebumps thinking about it. The book is in your hands.
14 years, actually.
Really? Yeah.
Yes.
So
I started writing in 2007 and finished it, final edits last year. In between, a lot of life changes. In between, published 2 other books. This book, Forbidden City, came close to selling in 2009, but didn't. And so I couldn't quit it. I just kept returning to it, revising it. And honestly, having lived through the Me Too movement, having lived through the pandemic, those events don't appear directly in the novel, yet they shaped who I am as a writer and shaped my understanding of those times in 1960s China on the eve of the Cultural Revolution. And I'm fully convinced that although I would have loved to have been published in 2009, I needed all those drafts and all those years to be able to write the book that is out in the world now.
And thank you for modeling that fortitude and stubbornness. I think that we have to have as writers, especially when it comes to one of the projects of our hearts, the one that we know we can't quit, even if its time is not now. You mentioned before we started talking that there was a Wellington Bay Area connection. What was that?
So during the pandemic, and this has actually also helped my writing practice, I became a forager.
Cool.
We were going out on so many hikes with the kids. With the help of an app and other resources, just miner's lettuce, plums, mint, tri-cornered leeks. But I thought I had mapped my neighborhood out completely. But late last fall, I discovered an egg-shaped fruit in late winter. And I was astonished. And I took a photo, I put it online, and people said, that's a feoa.
Oh, it's they say
Feijoa,
Fijoa.
yeah.
Actually,
Yes.
they say, I always try to pronounce it with like a Spanish Mexican accent, but it's actually
Yeah.
Fijoa. Fijoa.
Feijoa, yes. Or
You found
we call them
Fijoa
pineapple.
in your neighborhood?
Yes, or I call them pineapple guavas.
Yes, they taste like a
And
pineapple guava.
yeah, and or it tastes like a juicy Starburst.
Yeah, it
So
does.
I was actually astonished that feijoas are available commercially in New Zealand, right? Or that you could
Oh
get a
yeah,
soda in the flavor of it, right?
totally. Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas my friend is married to someone from New Zealand, and she just pines for them. And so the only way they can get them is they go foraging in Berkeley, because they're an ornamental crop in the
Oh
US, not
my God,
not
that
in the
is
way in New Zealand. Yeah.
hilarious. And what we have learned in this first year of living in New Zealand is that Fijoas are analogous to zucchini in the States, in which like you have to lock your car. If you don't lock your car, somebody's going to put a box of Fijoas into your car because everyone has them in the backyard and then everyone is trying to give them away. So there's this big rush of, do you like, okay, here's a box. Literally, we got air like dropped on our porch one morning. We had a friend text and say, look on your porch.
Yeah.
And there were probably 100 there. We could not get through them. I've been making bread, and yeah,
Yes.
that's amazing. And foraging is just so cool and so fun. And what an exciting thing to do with 10-and-a-half-year-olds.
Yes. Well, at the time they were in the third grade, but they can now recognize miner's lettuce. They always are a little suspicious that I'm about to snip and cut and grab. So
If you are interested in this, I'll just point you toward a business in your area called Sea Forager. And they are a kind of community supported sustainable fishery. And they're
okay.
located out near Half Moon Bay. But the owner does these incredible foraging along the coast tours
Okay.
where you're eating this and doing that. So that's super fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, I've been getting ads for morel mushroom foraging tours too. So maybe after the rush of the book stuff, I'll treat myself to one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Vanessa, thank you so very, very much for being here and talking about your book and for just showing us what it looks like to be getting it all done in a way that is really beautiful. I
Great. Well,
appreciate
thank you
that.
so much for wonderful questions, Rachel. And
You're
it was a
welcome.
pleasure meeting you and being on the show.